You may spend years trying to heal your anxiety, your loneliness, your failed relationships, and your exhaustion while protecting one image you do not dare touch: the image of the mother. You will question lovers, work, habits, fate, childhood in general, even God. But when the conversation moves toward the mother, something in you becomes careful. You say, "She did her best." Perhaps she did. You say, "I have moved on." Often you have not. You say, "Nothing terrible happened." And yet your whole adult life carries the shape of an old injury. I have seen again and again that you do not truly begin to heal until you can bear to see what your mother actually was for you. Not what you were told to say about her. Not what gratitude forces you to repeat. Not what guilt demands. What she was, and what you had to become in order to remain loved. The mother is not simply one more person in the story. She is the first world. Before there is philosophy, before there is religion, before there is society, there is the emotional climate created by the mother. Through her face, the child first learns whether life is welcoming or cold. Through her touch, you first learn whether need is allowed or dangerous. Through her presence, absence, tenderness, resentment, fear, and fatigue, you form your earliest expectation of love. This is why the mother reaches so deeply into the adult psyche. Even when the mind has forgotten, the body remembers. Even when memory is vague, the pattern remains. You may not remember what it felt like to wait all evening for your mother to become emotionally available. But later, you may call a distant partner irresistible. You may not remember how quickly you learned to care for your mother's moods. But later, you may call self-erasure loyalty. Perhaps your mother was anxious, intrusive, overprotective, and quietly controlling. Nothing terrible, you tell yourself. She loved me too much. Yet as an adult, you may feel guilty for every independent decision, anxious in freedom, and strangely safest when someone else is controlling the atmosphere. What is this, if not the old room recreated inside the soul? You may imagine that a wound is something obvious: cruelty, violence, abandonment. And yes, such things wound deeply. But there is another kind of wound that is often harder to recognize. It is the wound of never being fully met. The wound of being loved for the role you played rather than for the life you were. The wound of being needed by the mother instead of being held by her. The wound of having to become easy, bright, useful, calm, impressive, pure, or mature far too soon. I have seen how deeply you can become enslaved to the emotional weather of your mother. If she was lonely, you may still feel guilty for wanting a life of your own. If she was fragile, you may have become strong too early. If she was inconsistent, you may have become watchful. If she confided in you as though you were the adult, you may now find yourself drawn to partners whose need makes you feel important and trapped at the same time. You may call it love. But often it was bondage mixed with tenderness. I have also seen how this shapes you in specifically painful ways. If your mother was competitive, you may have learned that feminine life is dangerous. that softness invites attack, that beauty must be hidden or exaggerated, and that closeness cannot be trusted. If your mother was engulfing, you may still struggle to know what you yourself want. You may feel others with astonishing accuracy, yet remain foreign to yourself. You may love, help, soothe, organize, rescue, and endure. But to choose, to disappoint, to separate, that feels like betrayal. Then there is the depressed mother. This wound leaves a peculiar mark. You often learn that joy must be modest, need must be restrained, and spontaneity must not burden the room. So you become prematurely considerate. You can sense what others feel. You become perceptive. But you may also become ashamed of your vitality. Later you wonder why you cannot relax into pleasure, love, or ambition without a shadow of guilt. The old law is still operating. Do not become too alive if someone you love cannot follow you there. There is also the adored mother. You may have been taught to think that only the cruel mother wounds. That is not true. An idealized mother can wound just as powerfully. If you cannot see your mother as human, you may spend half your life dividing lovers into goddesses and disappointments. At first you worship, then you resent, because no real person can carry the perfection you once placed upon the mother. If you were raised under the invisible command to resemble the mother, continue the mother, justify the mother, you may feel a strange emptiness whenever you try to become distinct. You're not allowed to simply be. You must represent. This too is a wound. When I speak of the mother, I do not mean only the personal woman. I mean something larger. In the depths of the psyche, the mother is also an archetypal reality. She is the source of nourishment, rest, warmth, protection, and belonging. But the same image has another face. She can also smother, imprison, weaken, seduce, and devour. Ancient myths understood this. The Great Mother is not merely kind. She gives life, and she can swallow it again. This is why the problem of the mother is so difficult. You may want a simple verdict. Was she good or bad? But the psyche is rarely transformed by such childish accounting. What matters is not moral simplification. What matters is truth. How did her way of loving shape your soul? What did you learn you had to be in order to keep connection? What part of your nature did you exile because it disturbed her, frightened her, burdened her, or threatened her place? Perhaps you know this pattern from within. Outwardly you may seem kind, dependable, and gentle. Everyone may trust you, but you cannot choose. You drift between relationships, obligations, and opportunities, as though every clear decision were a crime. When you look more closely, a pattern becomes clear. Your mother may have suffered greatly and spoken often of how much she sacrificed. You may love her sincerely, but you may also have spent your childhood protecting yourself from her disappointment. So whenever you feel desire, conviction, or sexual clarity, you also feel guilt. You do not experience adulthood as freedom. You experience it as treason. Or perhaps your pattern is different. You choose partners who are confused, wounded, chaotic, self-absorbed, or dependent. At first this appears compassionate. And indeed, there may be real compassion in you. But beneath the compassion, there may also be an old compulsion. Your mother may have been unreliable, overwhelmed, or emotionally childlike. So you learned that love means carrying what another cannot carry. Later you call this devotion. But what you call devotion may actually be the inability to imagine love without exhaustion. Then you say you keep attracting the wrong person. Perhaps. But just as often, you are unconsciously attracted to the familiar shape of early duty. This is why healing cannot begin with blaming the mother, nor with defending her. Both are evasions. Blame keeps you tied to her through rage. Idealization keeps you tied to her through worship. The task is harder. You must see. To see without cruelty. To see without sentimentality. To let the image crack. This can feel almost unbearable. For the child in you believes that if you see too clearly, you will become disloyal. You fear that truth will kill love. But the opposite is closer to reality. Only false love is destroyed by truth. Real love survives reality. In the old stories, the hero must leave the house of the mother. You cannot remain forever in the protected enclosure. You must go into the forest, the desert, the sea, the underworld. Psychologically, this means something precise. You must separate from the mother image if you are to possess a soul of your own. If you do not, you will keep searching for mother in lovers, in institutions, in ideologies, in approval, in comfort, in addiction, in spiritual fantasies, and even in failure. You will either keep kneeling before what devours you, or keep raging against what you still inwardly serve. What then must be confronted? First, the grief. Much of what you call healing is really an attempt to avoid grief. You want peace without mourning. But if your mother could not love you in the way you needed, if she loved you only through fear, control, need, image, fragility, or inconsistency, then something precious was missing. You must grieve that. Not dramatically, not theatrically, but truly. Second, you must confront the anger. If you are gentle by nature, you may be terrified of this. You may confuse anger with ingratitude. But anger is often the first sign that the soul no longer consents to erasure. If it is faced consciously, it need not become cruelty. It becomes information. It tells you where your life was bent out of shape. Third, you must examine how the mother still lives through your choices. Do you still seek permission before feeling strong? Do you still become small around need, emotion, disapproval, or female suffering? Do you still confuse guilt with goodness? Do you still offer care in order to avoid being abandoned? Do you still call certain kinds of captivity love because captivity is familiar? These are not small questions. They lead toward the structure of fate. For what is unexamined in childhood is often repeated in marriage, repeated in sexuality, repeated in work, repeated in the way one uses money, health, time, and speech. The mother complex does not remain in childhood. It becomes atmosphere. It surrounds the whole adult life until it is brought into consciousness. There is one more difficulty. You may wait for your mother to admit the wound before you allow yourself to heal. This is a tragic mistake. Some mothers cannot see. Some can see only a little. Some defend themselves because they too were wounded children. If you make your healing dependent on her confession, you bind your future to her limitations. Then the child remains on the throne of your life. You must become able to know what happened, even if it is never named by the one who caused it. This is part of psychological adulthood. To know without permission, to feel without apology, to love what was good and still refuse what was deforming. Then something remarkable begins to happen. The world changes shape. You begin to feel the old spell weaken. You no longer mistake anxiety for love. You begin to feel where your life ends and another begins. You no longer need to purchase connection with self-betrayal. If you have lived under guilt, you begin to discover a strange new sensation: innocence. Not the innocence of the child who knows nothing, but the innocence of the adult who no longer lives under a false debt. This is real healing. Not merely feeling better, not merely becoming functional, but withdrawing your life from an ancient entanglement. I do not say this is easy. Few things are more difficult than seeing the mother clearly. For in that act, one loses an illusion that once made survival possible. But I know no deeper beginning. If your relationships repeat, if your peace collapses whenever guilt appears, if your tenderness turns into servitude, if your strength disappears in the presence of certain kinds of pain, if you cannot tell where love ends and obligation begins, then do not ask first what is wrong with the world. Ask what your first experience of love required from you. The answer may disturb you. It may also free you. For you do not heal by remaining loyal to the lie that shaped you. You heal when you can finally bear the truth. And once truth is born, the soul no longer needs to repeat the wound in order to remember it.